So I'm really big focused on social media because I essentially think social media is the future and super, super important. Building relationships via social media, so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So 20 years ago, the comedian Bill Hicks said, I do not believe making money in order to consume goods is mankind's sole purpose on the planet. It is to create and to share. Now obviously he was selling CDs and VHS videos and tickets to his shows, so it's not a complete sharing is caring kind of attitude that he was advocating. But as we know, the internet completely changed this way of doing business for all artists and for musicians and anybody like that. To put it in context, the development of the internet was only like the 5th information revolution in the history of mankind. There was the spoken word, the written word, the printing press, mass media, and the internet. And essentially when each of these things happened in history, it completely revolutionized the way that we share information and led to essentially revolutions. It also completely devalued the content that journalists make, that musicians make. Obviously that is essentially free now. As I see it, we have kind of 2 options in this kind of situation. It's evolution, so we can adapt or we can die. So what I am intending to do is to adapt and to thrive. And I think there's an opportunity for people to do that, for artists to do that. So back in the day when I was about 15, that was in the year 2000, which was coincidentally the best year ever for physical music sales worldwide. My friends and I would go every weekend into town on the number 6 bus, and we go from record store to record store to record store, listening to music at the listening stations, trying to decide what to get. You know, we go from Virgin to HMV to Golden Disc to Comet Records and all over the place. You have maybe 10 or 20 quid in your pocket, and that would get you like what, 1 CD or 2 CDs maybe if there was a deal going on. So you go around, you listen to all the albums, and then you decide to make your purchase. Then on the way home, you'd listen to the CD, you'd leaf through the lyrics. We'd get home, we'd go to one of our friends' bedrooms, listen to the CDs, talk about the music. And then after that, after everybody had gone, because you'd such a limited access to music, obviously, I'd only my CDs at home, you'd religiously listen to that new CD for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. We in fact used to call this weekly trip to town, the pilgrimage. And for us, it was a ritualistic, religious experience for us. And it is still one of my fondest memories to this day, is going to town with my friends on a Saturday to pick up these CDs and have a look around. I've gotten this. But this was in the traditional way that musicians would make connections with their fans. Because of the limited selection of music that people had, they barely even had a choice. They had to listen to this CD and they'd make a huge connection with it. But this experience is pretty much largely dead and replaced by streaming music. So people don't necessarily have to spend that much time with a particular musician. They don't have to make the financial investment, they don't have to make the time investment. There's a loss of community because you don't have that experience with your friends going and listening to the music, going to buy the music. We need to utilize social media to recreate the experience as best as possible. And I think if we do this, fans will invest in your idea and what you believe in, and will also invest and support your creative endeavors. I think there's 3 very important parts of how to do this. And one thing is that I think that now everybody has to have a story. Like, so whether you're a magazine or a musician, you have to have a story, because you can't tell the story necessarily through the music as much as you could anymore. So looking at a local level, you'd have good examples are Rosengano family, and they have their idea of immigration and the changing idea of what is Irishness. You'd have Girl Band, and they had their singer who suffers from mental health problems, and I believe when they were recording their album, lived in a tent outside his parents' house for a period of time, and that kind of plays into the chaotic nature of their music. And even if you look at someone like Ed Sheeran, he's like got a classic rags to riches kind of tale, which I believe is even more influential in his success than his actual music, which is fairly bland, to be fair. So I would be thinking, if I was talking to bands, I'd be asking them, what is your story? And it doesn't have to be like a big, crazy story. It could just be a fun story about how you used to go to town with your friends when you were 16 and you decided to start a band. You know, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Also then you have to be able to build a sense of community, and this is where obviously the social media comes in. So for instance, the way I look at social media is that if we imagine for a second that instead of being here at this talk, we're all in a pub and we're milling around, hanging out together. And imagine now if I was going from person to person and all I wanted to talk about was Overblown. So I go up to one person and I say, oh, did you read this interview I did with Kate Tempest? And I go over to this other person and I say, oh, did you see this premiere that we did with Silverbacks? Or I go to the next person and they say, oh, we've got this really interesting feminist punk list on the website, you should really check that out. And you think about like how you would react to that in that situation if your friend just wouldn't shut up about his project that he had going the whole time. So I believe that social media is like a pub. On our social media platforms, we should be sharing material that is interesting to our fans, not just forcing our own stuff on them. So if that means things like, if you're wandering around on the internet and you find an article on Pitchfork that you find interesting, you should share it with your fans, share it with the people, and ask them what they think. As simple as that. So I would even advocate doing that, I do that in my own music magazine. If I see something that I find interesting on the thin air, I'll share their article and ask people what they think. It doesn't have to be like an exclusive competition thing. I shouldn't be sharing the thin air, I'm losing out on traffic or anything like that. It should be more community-based. And definitely ask people's opinions, respond to their comments. I did see an Irish band recently that launched a new single, and there was 4 comments on their post, and they didn't like any of these comments, they didn't respond to any of these comments. So these are their big fans. They should be made to feel valued. You know, you should be talking to these people as if they're standing next to you and have just said to you, I really like your new song. And then I think it's very important to think about the idea of 1,000 true fans. So instead of constantly focusing on getting more and more fans, getting more likes, getting more followers, there should be, I think, more of a focus on nurturing the fan base that you already have, the community that you've already created. So, for instance, if you're in a band, if you have a magazine, do you have a fan that always likes your post, always comments on everything, and always gets involved? You should just maybe at some stage pick out this person and say, Bob, I really like you, Bob. I like the way you act. I like that you like what I'm doing. I'm going to send you something. PM me your address. And you send them, I don't know, a book, a pic, a t-shirt. It in fact, doesn't even really matter what you send them. But just to make that person feel appreciated. They're part of the club, you know, they're part of the community. So I think of social media as the same thing. I think that, you know, at the moment, the way we're living at the moment, we've all been essentially let down by every single institution in our lives, you know. We've been let down by the church and the government, the guards and the media and everything. So people are really searching for a place where they belong. They're searching for that feeling they had when they were 15 and hanging out with their friends. And I think it's possible to create that type of environment on social media. If you act with a genuineness, with an integrity, with an indecency, people will gravitate to that if you engage with them, you know? And at this point, I suppose you might be thinking that sounds like a lot of work, you know? And it is a lot of work. It's every day and you have to be consistent. You have to do, I don't know, about 35 or 40 tweets a day. And then do my Instagram thing, looking for that, and then doing loads of Facebook posts and commenting and going finding things and commenting on them. It is a lot of work. But when I feel like it's too much, I think of this quote from hardcore punk pioneer Henry Rollins. He said, there's no such thing as spare time, there's no such thing as free time, there's no such thing as downtime, there's just lifetime. And go. So, thank you very much.